In 2008, a man walked into a bank asking for a mortgage. Nothing unusual. The bank approved the loan, a few signatures, a few numbers typed into a screen, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of dollars existed, not transferred, not printed, not taken from a vault, created out of nowhere. That sounds like conspiracy talk, until you realize this is literally how modern banking works. Most people imagine banks as giant storage lockers. You deposit money, the bank keeps it safe, then lends some of it to someone else. Simple. Except that's not what actually happens. Modern banks do something far stranger. They create new money every time they issue debt. And once you see how the system really works, you start noticing something uncomfortable. Almost every dollar in the economy begins its life as someone's loan, which means debt is not just part of the system. Debt is the system. And right now, that matters more than ever because governments are drowning in debt, consumers are buried in debt, corporations are addicted to debt, yet somehow the world keeps demanding more borrowing just to keep functioning normally. It's like building an entire civilization on top of a credit card balance that can never fully be paid off. And strangely, almost nobody talks about how bizarre that actually is. So, let's slow this down. Imagine you deposit $1,000 into a bank. Most people think the bank physically stores that exact money somewhere, maybe digitally, maybe in cash. But banks learned a long time ago that almost nobody withdraws all their money at the same time. So instead of leaving your $1,000 untouched, they lend most of it out. Historically, this was called fractional reserve banking. The idea was simple: keep a fraction, lend the rest. If reserve requirements were 10%, the bank could keep $100 and lend out $900. Now here's where things get weird. That $900 doesn't disappear from your account. You still see $1,000 in your banking app. At the same time, someone else now has access to the $900 loan, meaning the banking system just turned $1,000 into $1,900 of spendable money. That's the magic trick. Not counterfeit money, not fake paper bills. Bank-created purchasing power. And over time, the system evolved even further. Today, in many countries, reserve requirements barely matter at all. Banks are no longer tightly limited by physical deposits first. Instead, banks create loans first, then find reserves later. That sounds backwards, because it is backwards. Here's how it works in practice. You walk into a bank asking for a $300,000 mortgage. The bank does not open a vault. It does not transfer existing cash from a rich saver. It simply types numbers into your account. $300,000 appears. Simultaneously, the bank creates an asset on its own balance sheet. You're promised to repay the loan with interest. Your debt becomes the bank's asset. That's modern money creation. A keyboard operation backed by confidence and legal structure. Economist Joseph Schumpeter once described banks as the headquarters of the capitalist system because banks don't just move money, they decide who gets new money first. And that changes everything. Think about it carefully. If new money enters the economy through loans, then the people closest to credit get access first. Large corporations, governments, asset investors, real estate developers, not ordinary workers. And this creates one of the strangest hidden effects in the economy. By the time new money reaches regular people, prices often rise first. Asset prices especially. Stocks rise, housing rises, land rises. Which explains a modern mystery. Why does everything feel more expensive even when economies supposedly grow? Because new money doesn't spread evenly. It enters through specific channels, usually debt markets, usually financial institutions, usually asset owners first, and the numbers become enormous. Globally, total debt is now well over $300 trillion. That includes governments, households, and corporations. $300 trillion, a number so large, the human brain stops processing it emotionally. If you stacked $1 bills representing that debt, the pile would stretch beyond imagination. But here's the truly uncomfortable part. For the system to remain stable, debt usually needs to keep growing. Why? Because when banks create loans, they create principal, but they don't create the interest needed to repay those loans. Which means somebody somewhere must continuously borrow new money into existence to keep enough liquidity flowing through the system. It's like an escalator that cannot stop moving. The moment credit expansion slows dramatically, the economy starts gasping for air. Businesses cut spending, layoffs begin, consumers panic, Asset prices wobble. You saw this during 2008. And again, briefly, in 2020. When lending freezes, modern economies suddenly look terrifyingly fragile because underneath all the productivity and innovation, the machine runs on credit expansion. Now, to be fair, banking itself is not evil. That's important. Modern civilization probably couldn't function without credit creation. Think about infrastructure, factories, technology companies, homes, transportation systems. Most of these things require enormous upfront capital. Banks allow future productivity to be pulled into the present. That's incredibly powerful. In many ways, modern banking accelerated human development faster than almost any invention in history. But every powerful system develops side effects, and banking's side effects are everywhere. Take housing. When banks aggressively issue mortgages, home prices often rise. Sounds great if you already own property. Not so great if you're 25 years old, staring at apartment listings like they're luxury yachts. Cheap credit inflates assets, and inflated assets create inequality because people who already own assets benefit first. Meanwhile, wages usually move slower. This is why entire generations increasingly feel locked out of wealth building, not because they're lazy, but because asset inflation can outrun labor income for years. And then central banks enter the story because modern banks don't operate alone. Above them sits another institution, the central bank. In the United States, that's the Federal Reserve. In Europe, the European Central Bank. These institutions influence how much lending happens by adjusting interest rates. Lower rates encourage borrowing. Higher rates slow borrowing down. Simple idea, massive consequences. When rates stay low for long periods, borrowing explodes. Money becomes cheap. And when money becomes cheap, people start doing strange things. Companies borrow billions to buy back their own stock. Investors speculate aggressively. Governments accumulate mountains of debt because repayments feel manageable. Everyone slowly adapts to easy money until inflation arrives. Then suddenly, central banks raise rates aggressively, and the entire system feels stress fractures everywhere at once. Mortgage payments jump. Corporate refinancing gets painful. Banks become nervous. Consumers pull back. The same debt that fueled growth now becomes a weight. And this creates one of the biggest ironies in modern economics. The economy often needs debt to grow, but too much debt can destabilize the economy itself. So policymakers constantly try to manage this impossible balance. More credit, but not too much. More growth, but not too much inflation. More liquidity, but not financial chaos. It's economic surgery using interest rates as blunt instruments. Sometimes it works, sometimes it absolutely does not. And then there's the psychological side of all this. Most people spend their entire lives working for money without fully understanding where money actually comes from. That's not an insult. The system is intentionally abstract. Your paycheck arrives digitally. Your rent disappears digitally. Your savings sit inside numbers on screens. The physical reality feels distant. But once you realize banks create most money through lending, you start seeing debt differently. Credit cards, mortgages, student loans, corporate bonds, government deficits. These aren't side features of the economy. They are the mechanism feeding money into circulation, which raises an uncomfortable question. What happens if societies eventually hit borrowing limits? What happens when consumers are saturated with debt? When governments already owe trillions? When interest payments alone consume huge portions of national budgets? Because infinite debt growth inside a finite world creates tension eventually. Japan has wrestled with this for decades. Europe has faced it repeatedly. The United States increasingly faces questions about long-term debt sustainability too. Yet markets continue operating almost normally. That's the strange beauty of financial systems. As long as confidence survives, the structure survives. Money itself is partly a confidence game, not fake, but collective belief matters enormously. The dollar works because people believe it works. Banks function because people trust they function. Loans hold value because repayment is expected. And when confidence cracks, history gets ugly very fast. Bank runs, currency collapses, financial crises. Civilizations have experienced versions of this repeatedly, sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. Which brings us back to the original question. How can banks create money from nothing? Technically, They create it from debt contracts, backed by legal systems, collateral, central bank support, and societal trust. But emotionally, it still feels strange because most people spend decades believing money is a fixed object, when in reality, modern money behaves more like an expandable network of promises. Promises to repay, promises to honor value, promises that tomorrow's economy will be larger than today's. And maybe that's the real secret underneath modern finance. The entire global economy runs on an assumption about the future, that growth will continue, that debts can be serviced, that confidence will remain intact. And if that assumption ever seriously breaks, then the question won't just be how banks create money. The question will become what money actually was in the first place.